Ms. Trump, is this an issue that would rise to the level of discrimination of these student groups if they're unable to organize for lack of a sponsor?
So on some of the stuff that you said earlier with regards to the fear that students are feeling, being able to express their political viewpoints, that's why these clubs, these conservative clubs, are actually so vital and important to students when they do want to speak out about some of their viewpoints and ideas. I think it's really important to recognize that the fear is pretty widespread on campuses. Faculty members have told me that they intentionally do not include open discussion in their classrooms anymore because they're afraid they might have to step in and make a comment. Students have told me, on the same vein of what you mentioned earlier, a Texas student told me that he doesn't wear cowboy boots to class because that's associated with conservatives, and he knows that if his professor found out he was a conservative, he fears that he would have retaliation via his grades. So there is a serious concern, and I can keep going on various examples. But to answer your question more directly about whether this is viewpoint discrimination, the policies that are in place on campuses that are creating these environments are in the vein of viewpoint discrimination. Most students and professors are afraid to associate themselves with conservative organizations, so they oftentimes will go to these meetings in secret, and professors are usually unwilling to be faculty advisors for clubs, which is usually a requirement. So that is something that once these universities start to be more open towards various viewpoints and stop discriminating, then maybe you're going to get more conservative professors who are willing to represent these clubs on campus.
Thank you.
Mrs. Trump, the legal advocacy work at Speech First shows how necessary it still is to combat violations of free speech. I believe it's important to hold institutions accountable, but this committee has thought long and hard on how to appropriately balance federal policy. Do you believe Congress has a role to play in ensuring colleges maintain free speech environments?
Yes, Congress does have a role to play because a lot of these universities receive federal funding, and so the onus is on Congress a lot of times to actually make sure that these institutions are protecting the rights of the students that are going to these schools, especially federal and publicly funded schools. Additionally, if the Department of Education is enforcing policies and putting policies into place that are violating students' First Amendment rights, then Congress has a role to investigate what's going on at the Department of Education and why they feel the need to do that. Also, there's a lot of definitions under Title IX and Title VI of harassment and discrimination that are ever changing with every administration. It would be wonderful if Congress could codify some of these definitions.
Ms. Trump, the title of this hearing is Diversity of Thought, Protecting Free Speech on College Campuses. As we heard today, universities and their administrators are increasingly focused on diversity, but only diversity in a narrowly defined way. We've seen a startling lack of philosophical diversity. In some ways, college administrators should promote more aspects of diversity, such as viewpoint diversity among the students and students' faculty. Do you agree with that premise?
That universities should promote more viewpoint diversity? Absolutely, yes. And there are ways to do it. The universities could actually teach students about viewpoint diversity, which is something they often leave out of their freshman orientation materials or often do not require students to discuss in the classroom. A lot of universities actually mandate that students take DEI classes, diversity, equity, inclusion classes, in order to graduate, which often will talk about anti-racism, trigger warnings, social movements, but they usually will lead out any kind of viewpoint diversity or free speech conversation, and that's usually not a mandated requirement in order to graduate. So the first step would be for universities to actually start trying to enforce this, because administrators really do paint the environment and paint the picture on the campus. You can see a lot of examples where what the administrators believe and what their political agendas are affecting and influencing students. Oftentimes, you'll see something like at what we saw at Colorado State University, where they demonize the concept of free speech by having a sign that says, if you or someone you know has experienced a free speech event, then here are 17 counseling services we can provide you for. So this is clearly when universities are not prioritizing these concepts, students are not going to prioritize them either.